How are you? Once again, it is No Huddle Necessary with your host, Jeff Barnes, here for another interesting night of arguments with your nuts and bolts sports football writers. Tonight, we're going to have a little bit of a different show for you. Okay, we've had several winners over the past few weeks. Almost everybody's won at least once. We have a couple of people who haven't found their way into the FaceTime column yet, but everybody tonight's got to win. So we're going to see who's going to get there. This will be our first multiple-time winner on the show. So we're going to bring back a couple of guys you've seen enough times. First of all, we're going to bring in our first winner, host of the Full Monty Show here on the Nuts and Bolts Sports Network, Monte Perez. Monty, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jeff, and I love the intro and the new background you have of the show. Definitely beats the raid can you had a few weeks ago. So we're loving it. Great job.
Yeah, man, from almost nothing to almost something. I'm feeling a little optimistic about myself
Looks
here.
great. Looks great.
And so while we're at it, we brought in the week one winner. We're bringing in the week two winner right now, and the most famous man on Nuts and Bolts Sports Network when it comes to names, Mr. Keith Richards. Keith, how are you?
I think you could just drop when it comes to names and just go with the most famous.
Well, listen, if you don't know who Keith Richards is, and whether it's you or the other Keith Richards, you're missing out because that is a zany character.
I'm going to cut down his level on bank account, but it's going to take a while.
And of course, one of our most recent winners, the prodigy of Nuts and Bolts Sports football writers, we're talking about Mr. Thomas Brown. And Thomas is blacked out on us, so you give him a second to catch up. I can see his face on the backside, but I can't see him. There he is. Thomas,
okay.
Can you hear us?
Okay. Yeah, how's everybody doing today?
All right.
What a show we got. Oh, man.
That's right. It's all winners, so make sure you're on 5G at least for this. All right, so
This is like the final four right here. All the first rounds no one cared about. Now these are the tournament of champions.
Yeah, well, this next 2 weeks is all winners shows. So 3 winners this week, 3 winners next week. So it's going to be a battle to see who gets to be the first multiple-time winner. All right, so since we're at it, let's get started. Let's go with our first quarter question. All right, so the Baltimore Ravens decided they had enough of Earl Thomas for the second time in 2 years. He is now looking for a new team. Of course, we all know what happened in Seattle. And now you're looking at it where he gets into a fighting training camp with one of his fellow DBs, rips his helmet off, punches him in the face, and less than a day or two later, he is now out of Baltimore. Reports had it that Dallas was the front runner, and Jerry Jones says, "Yeah, we're interested." We don't know if we're that interested. So, you guys tell me, if you were a GM, would you sign or pass on him? And we're going to start with we'll go with youth before beauty. So we're going to start with Thomas. So Thomas, start us off.
Oh, boy. First of all, just to throw a little nugget here, of course Jerry Jones will want to get Earl Thomas. I mean, he might as well get my left foot for a couple $1 million. I'm pretty sure he'll take it. But we're talking about a guy who is arguably still one of the best safeties in the league. Just like we want all of our defensive players to be, it's a little bit temperamental, and so I just want to take a second to go over his stats from last season. All right, so he had 49 tackles with 2 sacks, a forced fumble, and throughout his entire career thus far, we're talking 30 interceptions, 73 pass defense, 11 forced fumbles, 1 Super 3 times being a first team All Pro. Okay, his resume calls for him for but we're we are talking about a guy who's 31 years old. On that, I have no idea. But that was something that I'm a GM, I would like to take that into consideration. The guy's been party. Obviously, we just talked about him punching teammates. Not production versus chemistry. And I'm a guy who's based on chemistry, so I'm gonna have to wait a little bit on Thomas.
All right. Well, you still have about 30 seconds left on your argument. And because you're cutting in and out, I'm going to come back to you after I get the other guys. Just check your audio. Let's see if we can fix that. I want to get the last 30 seconds. I don't want to rob you any points because they couldn't hear you. All right. So we're going to come back. We're going to go to Keith. So Keith, come on in and let us know would you sign or pass on Earl Thomas?
Man, we're in uncharted territory here. Do you sign a player who simply just has on the field issues? Didn't beat up his girlfriend, didn't steal a car, do whatever. Like Thomas was saying, Earl Thomas is one of the best safeties, I think, of this past generation. But he is 34 years old. You look at the Ravens roster, and I don't see how they're going to easily replace him. There's a bunch of teams that could use him, namely the Dallas Cowboys. Denver Broncos wouldn't mind having him either. It's hard to say without knowing the full extent to what the locker room issues were in Baltimore. We know what's been reported. There's no disputing he got in a fight with one of his teammates. They're saying he had behavior that was adversely affecting the team. But what is Earl Thomas's side of the story? I don't think they're trying to set him up or lying about him, but at the same time, what if you asked him, what would he say was the issue there? I think it's a tough decision to make without knowing the full scope of the issue and hearing both sides of the story. He is 34, but I think he can still be serviceable to the right team for the right price.
All right. So there was a talk about culture. We know he was a big leader in Seattle. He comes into a different culture. Do you think it was a failure to adapt to the new culture? Did he try to take over and guys kind of rejected it? What do you think?
If with just the information that we have, that's what it would sound like. Pete Carroll always talks great about his past players, no matter if they peed on his car or whatever. Pete Carroll's going to be Pete Carroll. But you're really, outside of the end of his time in Seattle, haven't heard too many bad things about Earl Thomas. For sure, he is an alpha dog who played on a team of alpha dogs. He may not have the physical prowess that he did in his earlier years in NFL, but his mentality doesn't change. So maybe he just wasn't as good as he thought he was, and he did not take it well that people were saying that.
All right. Monty, you get to close this one out. Well, almost.
All right. Well, let's just begin with this has nothing to do with the fight. If you've been to an NFL training camp, there's fights almost every day. As a matter of fact, some coaches prefer when the teams fight because it shows that they're having hard practices. They're going after one another. But here's the deal. Before we get into Earl Thomas, I have some basic rules when it comes to NFL players or whether or not I should pick them up. So let's look at recent history. A few years ago, the Jets traded to Seattle for Percy Harvin, the wide receiver. My first thought was, do the Jets, who haven't won a Super Bowl and been to a Super Bowl since 1969, do the Jets know more than Pete Carroll, who's been to multiple national championships, who's been to 2 Super Bowls and won 1? No, of course not. Now, let's go back. A few years ago, again, with my Jets, unfortunately, Darrelle Revis was not re-signed by the Patriots, and the Jets picked him up. Am I supposed to think the Jets know more than the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick? No, Darrelle Revis wasn't a top 10 defensive back when he got to the Jets. Now let's look at Earl Thomas. 7-time Pro Bowler, yes. But over the past 2 years, he's played in 19 games, 4 with Seattle, where he had 22 solo tackles, 15 with the Ravens, 32 solo tackles, 2 sacks, 5 interceptions. Is Earl Thomas still an elite safety? No, he's on the back 9 of his career. And here's the biggest problem, guys. I'm going to take a pass on Earl Thomas for one basic reason. There are 4 coaches in the NFL who every player loves and wants to play for. Andy Reid of the Kansas City Chiefs, Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Pete Carroll in Seattle, lets everyone have a personality, and of course, John Harbaugh and the Ravens. Earl Thomas, his last 2 teams, they didn't want him. 2 players' coaches did not want Earl Thomas in Pete Carroll or John Harbaugh. Now, some team is going to pick him up. We saw Greg Hardy, who basically abused his girlfriend, threw her on a bed of semi-automatic weapons, get picked up by the Dallas Cowboys. So someone is going to want him, but it's going to be a losing organization because winning organizations are going to run away from this guy.
All right, good stuff. Thomas, I'm going to give you another 40 seconds so you can follow up. Like I said, we had audio issues with you before, so I don't want you to lose any points because of audio. So go ahead and throw your last couple of points in there.
I just wanted to say that that in terms of what Monty said in terms of any team picking up talent just for the sake of a brand name. Look, I get it. Brand names, shoot, we get it. But like I said, it's production versus chemistry. And Thomas, even though his production says that, I'm worth the $10 million plus, that I think I'm worth, I might mess up you guys' chemistry because I want to win so much. So, it's I don't know which one you want to take. I would stay away from that.
All right. Very good. So we're off to a nice hot start. So let's keep it rolling. Bring everybody back in as we get ready for second quarter. So Roger Goodell made an appearance this week on Emmanuel Acho's show, and he spoke to him. And once again, he was trying to sound contrite about everything that happened with Colin Kaepernick. As we know, Kaepernick remains unsigned. We saw during the draft, Roger Goodell, who says that was his idea, not the owners, by the way. He said it was his idea to make that apology video during the draft, or the week of the draft, about the not listening to the players on the issues about the anthem and everything else. He said this week that he would personally say that he was sorry that we didn't listen to Kaepernick when this whole thing started. Now, to you, are you guys buying this act of contrition from Roger Goodell, or is this just more lip service to try and get past this so we can get to the season? Keith, why don't you start us off this time?
Absolutely not. No. He's trying to say, I wish we would have listened to Roger Goodell. Or listen to Colin Kaepernick. That's the equivalent of saying there's a speed limit sign of 25. You're driving on a sheet of ice in a Ferrari, and you're going 50 miles an hour, and you crash. Well, maybe I should have went 25 miles an hour. Maybe I should have paid attention to that. Roger Goodell had every chance to listen to Colin Kaepernick. Players were begging him to. Fans are begging him to. Even some owners were begging him to. He didn't. I give him a slight pass in the sense that he does have employees, or he does have people that he works for. He works for the NFL owners. The owners were not conducive to the message that Colin Kaepernick was trying to put out. So I give him a slight pass there. But at the same time, even though he works for the owners, he is an individual himself. And at no point that I can recall throughout that whole situation did he ever try to put himself outside of the box and say, well, maybe there is a little bit of something that Colin Kaepernick is saying that we should listen to. He said whatever he did to get away from the microphone and went away from it. Now that the tide has changed and everyone's saying, oh, yeah, they should have listened to Kaepernick, he's saying everything he needs to say to make himself look like he tried to do something when history shows that he's tried to do nothing and Colin Kaepernick is still unemployed.
Monty, tell us how you feel about this.
Okay, so I'm buying it, and it's because I live by this rule. It's never the wrong time to do the right thing. So, was Roger Goodell on the wrong side of history? Yes, he was. But if you look at what's happened over the past year, if you look at the NFL in general, okay, the NFL is run by conservative, quote unquote, conservative white men. Now, these conservative white men preach family values and God down in Texas. Let's remember something. It's all an act. Robert Kraft, who's a diehard Trump supporter, got arrested for being at a sex slave parlor. Not a prostitute, not a call girl, a sex slave where underage girls were performing sexual acts against their will. So, and why do I bring this up? Because the media still doesn't get it right. It was never about disrespecting the flag. Colin Kaepernick spoke to a veteran, and the veteran asked him to kneel. But Donald Trump said it's disrespecting the flag, it's disrespecting our soldiers. Look, I've watched about 1,000 Knick games growing up in New York. I've watched about 1,000 Ranger games. The only time they play the national anthem is during the playoffs. Because you know what they do during the regular season? They go to a commercial. Aaron Rodgers said it best. It's never been about the flag, not then, not now, not ever. What Colin Kaepernick, one of the first articles I wrote for Nuts and Bolts Sports, was Colin Kaepernick is on the right side of history. He peacefully protested. Let's remember how our country was started. Our country was started by the Boston Tea Party. You know, the thing where our founding fathers started to break away from Great Britain? 340 chests of tea were thrown into the Boston Harbor, and it cost $1.7 million back then. So Colin Kaepernick peacefully protested. It was never about the flag, but I am buying Roger Goodell's. We cannot kill Roger Goodell because he's trying to do the right thing now. It's like if you make a mistake in your marriage or your relationship, you can't have your partner keep going back to that when you're trying to evolve and get better. Let's give Roger Goodell the benefit of the doubt.
All right. And finally, Thomas, close this up for us.
Well, I think we all understand in this stage of the game, in the times that we are living in, Roger Goodell is not, of course, he is not speaking for himself oftentimes, but in this instance, he is. And I want to take this time out to really go after these owners that are kind of using him as a puppeteer. You know, so I just want to ask some questions, okay? These owners, okay? These are the same owners, you know, those billionaires that advocated the league for the league to blackball Colin Kaepernick, because that's basically what happened. That's what's been happening. And what does this mean now? Does this mean that now the league is more open? Are we talking about 32 owners genuinely being open enough to accept Colin Kaepernick on their team? Is that what we're doing now? And why are we making this statement now? We done had protests all over the place. We've done had I mean, and it's not funny, but we're talking about different shootings taking place, lives that are being lost, And the reason why I'm saying that is because this is leading to my third question, which would be, why are we waiting until the bottom line is potentially affected to finally say anything? Okay, because I honestly feel like that's where this is what it's about. The owners are scared that what, we're starting to lose people, we're starting to lose our money, and we gotta give them something. It was a here, take it. That's what it came across to me. I think Roger, as always, and sometimes yes, he does fall short, just like everybody else. Just like always, finds a way to say the right thing. Okay. Now, as far as what they do, as far as the actions ahead of that, I have no idea. Who knows? But the reason why I'm trying to understand the owner's perspective is because these are the people that Roger is answering to, and so I'm just trying to figure out what is the motive, what is the real purpose behind sitting here saying, hey, you know what, let's just say this now because it might be affecting our bottom line.
Unsportsmanlike conduct, 15 yards.
Oh, you're the first one to actually get buzzed. Oh man, first argument to get buzzed is Thomas. That I should have taken a bet on that because we wouldn't have guessed that. But yeah, you were over your time, so I had to buzz you, Thomas. All right,
cool.
So
it's cool.
that's all right. But good argument as we're moving on to the third quarter. Kind of going to keep this going so we can try to get some extra time for everybody that's not aware. Usually, I'm kind of dragging stuff out in between segments. Taking up the whole hour. We got something special towards the end of the show, so when we get past the FaceTime, don't go anywhere. All right? All right, so every year since high school, I've always bought the Athlon Pro Football Preview magazine. In the last few years, I've picked up the college one to amuse myself. And I really had a good chuckle when I saw their top 50 players. And at number 24 is Notre Dame quarterback Ian Book, which as a talent evaluator, I'm quite taken back that out of 50 players, he's number 24, the top 50. He'd be in my top 24 quarterbacks, but not 50 players. So my question to you guys is, would you put him in your top 50? All right. And this time Monty's going to start us off, and I already know what Monty's going to say. But
okay. Well, listen, he completed 68% of his passes in 2018, threw for 19 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. In a full season last year, 60%, which is less than 68%. He threw 60%, but 34 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, which is pretty good. Now, ESPN Mel Kiper has gotten numerous picks and players wrong over the years. Remember, Mel Kiper said that Ryan Leaf was going to be better on and off the field than Peyton Manning. Okay, Ryan Leaf this May just got arrested for domestic battery. Ryan Leaf has been a disaster on and off the field. So Mel Kiper gets it wrong. But even if you agree with Mel Kiper, it's okay to not be a pro prospect, and you could be a great college football player. Tim Tebow and Marcus Mariota were two of the best college quarterbacks I've ever seen. They didn't work out in the pros. At least Mariota still has another chance, but Tebow didn't. But this is all about perspective, right? If you're a Notre Dame fan and he's being ranked 24th, that's a bad thing for Notre Dame, who has championship aspirations. Look at last year. The best 4 quarterbacks in the country in college football were Trevor Lawrence of Clemson, who's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. Justin Fields for Ohio State is going to be the number 2 pick in the draft. Joe Burrows went number 1 to the Bengals. And Jalen Hurts, who went to the Final Four with Oklahoma, is a backup in Philadelphia. So if you expect ND to be a Final Four team and they have him ranked as a 24th best player, you're not getting to the Final Four. You're not getting to the Final Four because, as we've seen with all the rule changes and all the offenses, which basically started with Chip Kelly and Oregon Ducks, my little banner right there, you're seeing hurry up offense, fast paced offense. So let's just say I agree. He's the 24th best player. That is a bad sign for Notre Dame fans who think they could make it to the Final Four. Because if he's the 24th best player, not in the top 10, you're not going to the Final Four because quarterbacks get you there.
All right. Good stuff. Thomas, how do you feel about this?
So I decided to take my due diligence. And I looked up the list. Okay. So I did my research, and here's what I got. Okay. According to that list, he is the 6th best quarterback in the nation. All right. These are his stats. This is book stats from this past season. Okay. 60.2 completion percentage. He had 3,034 yards passing. He had 34 touchdowns to 6 interceptions and a passer rating average of 149.1. Okay, this was all last year. Okay, I want to talk to you guys about the 3 quarterbacks that book is above. Okay, I'm gonna start off with freshman Kadon Slavis. I hope I said his name right. I might have not. From USC. Okay, this is a freshman. 71.9 completion percentage. Okay, 3,502 yards passing, 30 touchdowns to just 9 interceptions. His passer rating average was 167.6. Okay, this is just a freshman we're talking here. All right, we're moving on to the next quarterback, Tanner Morgan out of Minnesota. Okay, 66 completion percentage, 53 yards passing. Okay, 30 touchdowns to just 7 interceptions, and the passer rating average 178.7. Okay, this is all from last season. All right. Lastly, we got Shane Bukele. I could be wrong with that one. From SMU, 62.7 completion percentage, 39.29 yards. Yes, that was almost 4,000 yards passing. Okay, 34 touchdowns to just 10 interceptions with a passer rating of 148.8. Let's see. Is he better than any of those guys? The brand says that he is. But I would take at least one of these guys ahead of him. So what does that tell you? Maybe 24 may not be the number for him. That's just me.
All right. Good stuff. Keith, you're going to close this one out.
I'm going to be 100% honest. I did not know who this guy was until I saw it in the email. So you can pretty much guess what my answer is going to be. A resounding no. And that could be a little biased because I don't know that much about him. I don't follow Notre Dame that much because they've been kind of irrelevant since Tua and his fake girlfriend left a few years back. But even just looking on stats alone, he was the about 24th best quarterback, like you said, last year. If you look on the list itself, if he's such a great quarterback, you would expect to see some of his teammates in the top 50 with him, a running back, a tight end, a wide receiver, not a single one. So how good is he really if he doesn't have any other top 50 players? And now you can look at it in the sense that he is that good because he makes the players around him better. But does he really? If you look at Notre Dame stats, there's not a single receiver or running back that jumps out as, you know what, he's really good as well. So how good is he if he's not even making his own players better? Like I said, there's just no way. I can try 50 different ways to see it, and I just don't see it.
All right. So not only as a Notre Dame fan, but as a scout, when I graded Ian Book last year, before he decided to return to college, I had a draft grade on him. It was a 5th round grade. Okay. He is not that good a quarterback. Right, to rank him 24. I was debating whether this should be a topic on this show or should I just mention Athlon on Twitter and see what happens. And I say, no, we're going to debate this because I'm making sure I'm not the only one seeing this. 24 out of 50. Yeah, he is.
Like I said, Mel Kiper has him going. Has him going in the late rounds, and he says at best, he's not even better than Jake Fromm, and at best, he's a third string quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, he is. First of all, if you look at him, we've talked about this. Notre Dame, if they're going to be elite, they have to have a big time quarterback. They haven't had it, and he's definitely not it. But nevertheless, it is time for the fourth quarter. Throw your forwards up, everybody. Throw your forwards. All right, so the AP poll is out. And of course, the Clemson Tigers are number one. Shocking, right? But you think about it, Clemson didn't win the championship last year. LSU did. And don't forget, there's that potential powerhouse in the backyard named Alabama. So how is Clemson ranked number one over those guys? So you tell me, and we're going to start it off with Monty this time. Who is your number one?
All right, well, let me start with this. In college football and basketball, there shouldn't be any rankings until the first month of the season. It makes no sense to me. In 2017, UCF, University of Central Florida, under Scott Frost, who is now at Nebraska, went 13-0. They weren't ranked in the top 25 to midway through the season. Now, this team that year under Scott Frost had a better recruiting class than Florida, had a better recruiting class than Miami, had a better recruiting class than Florida State. They went to the Peach Bowl and they beat Auburn 34-27. Auburn beat Alabama that year. So, no, there shouldn't be any preseason rankings in college basketball or college football until about a month into the season. But let's talk about should Clemson be ranked. We just talked about Ian Book and his 24th ranking overall. You need to have the best quarterback in the country or an elite quarterback to get to the Final Four. They have the best quarterback in the country in Trevor Lawrence. If you were going to build a lab and create a quarterback, it would probably be Trevor Lawrence. And here's what Dabo Swinney has done over the last 5 years. He's been to 5 straight Final Fours. They were ranked second, 1, 4, 1, 2. Over the past 5 years, 69 wins, 5 losses. He's 38-2 in conference play. 38-2. He has the best Trevor Lawrence, and here's what people aren't talking about. Remember the speech in 2008 that Tim Tebow gave after they lost to Ole Miss? No one's going to work harder. No one's going to prepare more than we do, and we will not lose another game. He went on to win a national championship. Trevor Lawrence has never lost a high school game or a college football game until they got humiliated and embarrassed by LSU last year. He was terrible last year against LSU, okay? They lost 42-25. He was 18-37. Trevor Lawrence is coming back, and he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got an attitude. So should Clemson be number one? My answer is there anything higher than number one? Because they have the best team in the country, hands down. Dabo Swinney will get to his 6th straight Final Four, and Trevor Lawrence, if there is a college football season, will win a national championship.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. All right. Thomas, you're up.
Wow. If anybody could put on the pom-poms, we might as well put Monty on the team. But anyway, usually when I look at a top team on any ranking, I'm taking into consideration a few things. Number one, do they have a great coach? Check. Do they have a great quarterback? Check. Okay. Do they have surrounding pieces around that great quarterback? Yes, they do. So, we have Trevor Lawrence here, all right, who, by the way, let's not forget, all right, he did struggle midway through the season last year, all right, But eventually he picked it up late this seasons. All right, okay, fine. All right, cool. Um, but I believe that that the roster is coming back. Okay, there's not much of departures from that roster from last season, which I think that helps them a lot. And you have two Heisman front runners, if you ask me, in the same backfield. And I'm not talking about two running backs. I'm talking about a quarterback and a running back. Um, uh, Etienne can run the football, give you an easy 4.5 yards a carry. All right. And then the moment you think that you stop the run, don't worry about it because Trevor Lawrence will launch it to the other side of the field. No question. So is it justified for them to be number one? Absolutely. Do I think that they should be number one? No. I think that Alabama, that guy called Nick Saban, he's still a coach. He's still running things. And so I think with some of the pieces that he's also bringing back too, it might actually help him a long way. So I think Alabama will still be number one in my book because the defense is still there and he's still running the show.
All right. Mr. Richards, take us out.
So let's address the elephant in the room. LSU won the championship. They didn't even top the crack five. And that apparently has some people feeling a certain type of way. Let's look at why they're not in the top five. They lost Joe Burrow. They lost Justin Jefferson. They lost who else was there? Patrick Queen. They lost a lot of that championship talent in the offseason. I think they should be happy that they are ranked number 6 because honestly, I think that's a bit generous. So let's just get that out of the way. LSU should not be ranked number 1. And I mean, it really boils down to two teams, I think, as to who should be the number 1 team, whether it's Alabama or Clemson. I know Ohio State is ranked number 2. But we see how much Ohio State seems to falter down the stretch on a lot of occasions. For sure, Alabama has probably the most talent between the top 3 teams, Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama. But Trevor Lawrence is probably not only going to be the best quarterback in college football this season, he might be the best player in college football this season. I mean, he has to be on the top of many lists of Heisman hopefuls going into the season. Yeah, he had some tough outings last season in some big games. But if he is a player that I think he is, he will translate those tough outings into wins, big wins, and a championship. Like you said, you can't always just completely toss a player aside because they had a couple of bad games. I mean, if you look at those Clemson games, he wasn't the only one that had bad games. That secondary was getting burnt by a lot of players as well. So he doesn't play both sides of the ball. But I think he will take it as a learning experience, be a much better quarterback down the stretch, and I just don't see them losing a single game this year. It might be close for a couple games against the higher tier teams, but I think when it comes down to it, that hurt that he took last season, he's going to translate that into some wins this season.
All right. Well, folks, it is that time.
That never gets old, by the way.
That's Michael Buffer never goes away. And if I can get the sound bite of him saying in the beginning, we would start. But nevertheless, it'd probably be a gimmick infringement. I'd probably have to pay him out of pocket for that. So, but we have a winner. We have a winner. So, with that being said, let me take Michael Buffer down. if you're not first, you're last, and the words Ricky Bobby's dad. So it doesn't matter where you finish after first place, you get sent to the back regardless. So I'm in no particular order. The first person eliminated from this week's winners championship. I'm not going to use a meme for this one. I got to sing him out. Me. Bye, Eagles, bye.
You've been waiting all day for that. I bet.
Listen. It's rough when I got to put that Eagles thing up there. When they fly, Eagles fly. All right. So, with that being said, Trebek says that's it. The winner of the Champions Edition, Week 1, is none other than Monte Perez.
Oh, the Oregon Ducks. That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
So
I love that.
Sending you back, Keith. You'll be back. Don't go anywhere. All right, Monty, you got the floor. Your FaceTime is yours. 3 minutes, and you are out.
Well, I know I won because of my Oregon Duck banner. Keith doesn't have anything, so it was strictly, the way it looks. It has nothing to do with what I said. So I'll take that because I love that Oregon Duck banner. But I was going to talk about what's going on in the NBA, but we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to talk about something else right now that really, really bothers me, and that is when the casual fan, remember fan is short for fanatical. We're seeing all fans all across the country now with the NBA bubble and players missing, saying players are soft, players are weak. I wish we had I hear this with the Knicks fans all the time. I miss the glory days of the Knicks. What glory days? I grew up watching the Knicks. We went to the finals in 94. We lost to Houston. We went to the finals in 99. We lost to the San Antonio Spurs. That's not the glory days, okay? The glory days is what LeBron did in Cleveland, what LeBron did in Miami, what the Golden State Warriors are doing. Those are the glory days, okay? Winning titles, okay? So stop this. I miss the glory days when players were tough. Patrick Ewing, who is ranked, I think, 43rd or 40th in the top 50 players of all time, was 6'11", 235. He played center. LeBron James is 6'9", 6'10", 255 pounds. He plays point guard. Point guard. Don't tell me that these players are softer now. The average offensive lineman during the 1990s was 6'3", 290 pounds. The average offensive lineman last year, 6'5", 313 pounds. Players today aren't softer. They're just protecting their brand. Magic Johnson signed a contract, a 25-year, $25 million contract when in the third or fourth season in the league with the Lakers. LeBron makes that in 1 year. So when players sit out, I don't like it, but they're protecting their investment. But don't tell me that players are softer now. Michael Jordan was so tough. Yes, he was. But Kawhi Leonard is Michael Jordan right now, the master of the mid-range game. Except the difference is Kawhi Leonard is 3 inches taller and 35 pounds heavier. Players today are bigger, stronger, and faster. I'm not saying Jordan couldn't play in today's game. Patrick Ewing was a jump shooter. He'd be perfect as a stretch 5. But stop saying these players are softer when they work out more. They're in better shape. They're bigger, stronger, and faster. And stop talking about the glory days. The glory days of the Knicks, it was 85-81 in every NBA Finals against the Houston Rockets. It was boring basketball. I don't want to see tougher guys. I want guys playing longer. I want to see my players on the field. No one wants to see their players get hurt because the rules are letting you cheap shot somebody.
Unsportsmanlike conduct, 15 yards.
Oh, wow. Nobody ever outruns FaceTime, Monty. What is that? What is that? Oh, so normally we would go to sign off, but I wanted to save an extra 15 minutes of the show so we could have a conversation. Everybody knows what's going on in this country as far as the civil unrest when it comes to policing and the communities. We've seen it today where the NBA players refuse to take the court and protest what's going on. We saw the violence that happened last night with the shooting of protesters. So we're going to have a discussion for the last 15 minutes because this warrants it. It is that serious a situation. It affects every community. Even if you don't believe it affects yours, it does. And I think that what you're seeing now is that people who feel this doesn't affect their community is bleeding into your community because there are people in your community that are taking either they're joining the protest or they're out there countering the protest, leading to some of the violence. So let's have an open discussion. I'm not going to call anybody. I'll just jump in as we feel because plain and simple, it affects everybody.
Well, I think Doc Rivers said it best the other night when he said, African Americans they love this country, but this country doesn't love them back. It's real simple, guys. If someone did to my father or a family member what these cops are doing to these innocent African American men, I would not only be out in the street, I'd have what did Al Pacino say in Scent of a Woman? I'd take a flamethrower to this place. When you see an innocent black man get shot 8 times in the back with his kids in the car, or you see an innocent black man for 8 minutes have a police officer's knee on his neck, how many times are you going to get smacked in the face before you fight back? Now, look, I'm not advocating violence, no way, shape, or form. But what the NBA did today was 100% right. J.R. Smith had a tweet. I don't quote J.R. Smith ever. But J.R. Smith said, "You're not hearing us, so now you're not going to see us."
And it's a very poignant thing to say because it's the truth. There are people that are choosing to ignore it. And, I think we've talked about it. There are so many things that people have tried to do when it comes to this. If you remember, for many years, they kept saying, well, if the police department looked like us, it would change things. So they added more minorities to the police forces. Didn't change anything, especially in New York. If you look at the case with George Floyd, there were minority police officers there who let it happen. So obviously adding people of color to the police force didn't change anything. Well, retraining them. Well, who retrains them? Because if you retrain them with the people who are training them now, they're still going to learn the same things. One thing I learned when I was looking at that as a potential career, profiling is part of the job. We found out profiling is harmful, especially in this day and age. It is an outdated technique. Why? Because before it would say, well, you look for somebody who doesn't belong. Well, 90% of the time, if it was a white community, it was a black person that didn't belong there. Now, you don't know if that's somebody's husband. You don't know if that's somebody's son with the amount of mixed families we have. All right. If we're not redlining, people could buy a house anywhere. So you don't know if that person rightfully belongs there, as we saw with the case of the Harvard professor who was stopped on his doorstep. So that is obviously an outdated tactic still being taught. Okay. The shooting of these civilians. Their officers are taught to shoot center mass. They have now no longer 6 shooters. They have now semi-automatic handguns that have clips. So they are emptying clips at least halfway into civilians shooting center mass. It's designed to kill. So you're not getting your due process because you're not even making it to jail.
Let me just say this. Say this, and I'll let you guys finish. Obviously, I'm Hispanic. I'm not African American, so I want to hear your guys' perspective. But I'm going to say this: I had 2 friends. One was Hispanic, one was white. One worked as a state trooper in Texas, the other worked in New Jersey. Both of them quit over the last 3 years, and the media is not talking about this. But you could Google this; it's common knowledge. The amount of white supremacists that have infiltrated the police force is mind-boggling. It's borderline scary. And I'll stop with this and let you guys finish the conversation. I say this all the time. I'll support any politician, any doctor, any teacher, any police officer. But this notion that we must always protect and support police officers or doctors no, if you're wrong, if you're a criminal, I'm not going to support you. End of story. And we have a lot of white supremacists all across the country, And again, not to talk political, but I used to do a political show. And I said this when Donald Trump got into office, and I'm so sad that I was right about this. He's going to turn America into 1950s Mississippi, and that's what's happening.
Absolutely. Thomas, you look, you got something to say.
No. I'm just speaking from my lens as a young black man, just kind of watching everything unfold. I'm not gonna lie, it's disheartening. It's scary. It brings a whole lot more fear than what I might have saw in a movie or what I saw on a TV show that was fake. And now we're seeing it turn into reality, and it bothers me. And again, I'm speaking from a standpoint of the fact that I am young and that actually I am 19. So honestly, if it, had I not said that, who knows? I don't know if any of that stuff matters right now. But what I'm saying is that I could walk around anywhere and literally my fear just went from whatever it was before, and now it enlarges now because I don't know what's going on. Going back to what LeBron said the other night, where he said, "You have no idea what officer woke up to that morning. You don't know how he felt. You don't know what's going on in that household. You don't know what's going on in that police department. You don't know what's going on." And that, quite honestly, because we have so many question marks everywhere, no matter where we turn, it's not good, and it's quite frightening for not just myself but those who are younger than me that are watching this, and we have no idea what to make of it. It seems like no matter which way we find a way to try to solve the issue, we end up finding a way to have 10 more problems. So I don't know what to make of it, to be quite honest with you.
Hey, Keith, you got anything to add?
So I did not realize Thomas was that young. Off by a few years. But kind of to continue from that, he's 19, I'm 33. So I'm not that old. I didn't see the Watch riots, wasn't even thought of for the civil rights movement, but I've seen some things in my lifetime. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, in a time where per capita it was one of the murderous cities across the country.
Mm-hmm.
I don't consider myself to be an expert in race relations or anything like that, but my unique experience with life has shown me and taught me and given me a little bit more perspective. I spent the first 14 years of my life living in housing projects in the ghetto, dirt of dirt, poor of poor, whatever you can think of. Last half of my life, I've lived in what one person would deem white America, in the suburbs. I wear New Balance shoes. I was in a bowling league. Complete opposite of what you would think, and in a position where one would think that these things, like what happened with Jacob Blake, don't affect me. And it's simply just not true. For instance, last week I got a flat tire. I'm sitting there waiting for roadside assistance to come. Cop pulls up behind me. And just to say for sure, I am not one of these people that thinks that every single cop is bad. I just don't believe that to be true. The problem is you don't want to run into that one bad cop. So even though I know I had done nothing wrong, I'm sitting there waiting for the guy to come change my tire. When the cop pulls up behind me and is walking to my car, you can't help but think, well, is this the last day I'm going to be alive? And I hate to make it sound so dramatic, but that's really what goes through your mind. And it's kind of a situation where you don't know what you don't know. Like I can tell stories all day long of how I saw a man shot in the head when I was 8 years old, or I've seen people stabbed. I've seen drug deals go down. Worst things you can think of. But until you experience certain things and see certain things for yourself, you can't realize just how bad they are. Like, for instance, I kind of have my feet in both camps. I'm a black man married to a white woman. I can tell her all day long how bad housing projects are, but she doesn't know that until I go back home to visit my family and she just goes to see it. I can tell her I get weird looks from people in the suburbs but she doesn't know that until we go out to lunch at the Village Inn and all the old white people are looking at us because they don't approve of our relationship. So, I mean, it's sad that we still haven't made much progress, but really the hope that I have at this point is I can tell people things all day long, but now they can see it. So now that people see it, I hope that they decide to do something about it.
And that's what we can only hope for. I mean,
I was going to say, one of the things you have to do is you have to vote. I mean, we're going through a pandemic. I can't go out of my house without a mask. We have people unemployed. I mean, the last 3 years have been an absolute disaster. And the only thing you could do right now is you could protest, you could donate, and you could vote. That's what you got to do. Power of the ballot box.
Absolutely. You know, I hear a lot of the times when it comes to these discussions, we hear about the civil rights movement and the different ideologies. Oh, King was right, King was wrong. Malcolm was right, Malcolm was wrong. Huey was right, Huey was wrong. Black people don't all think the same. Right? We're not all the same. You know, if you're from the hood, you don't always think as the same person as somebody who was born and raised in the suburbs. Right? So you needed every one of those different ideologies at that time. And you still need them now. And one of the biggest arguments that I get into is that people say, well, you know, we didn't really come that far. You know, if you look at when Dr. King was doing everything that he did, if you look at the difference, there was that nonviolent movement has worked, and the results are different for a reason. Right, two people were known for that. Well, of course, Mandela also did it. But you think of that movement, you think of Gandhi, and you think of Martin Luther King. Gandhi started that movement in South Africa. It didn't work, just like it didn't work for King. When he went back to India, he was able to make it work against the British because the British were the minority. They were controlling a foreign land. King's his results are much similar to what Gandhi had in South Africa. The reason being, he was a minority. Their numbers were smaller. Blacks are still a minority in this country. So you can have all the revolution you want. It's going to be slow coming because the people you are trying to get to give you that equality still outnumber you.
Yeah, Doc Rivers said you don't need to be black to see what happened, and a man getting shot 8 times to have empathy and realize this is wrong. The problem is there's a lot of people who enjoy seeing that, the white supremacists.
Yeah. And not only that, just the people that, you know, as long as I'm not racist, it doesn't concern me. And no, it does concern you. Because no matter what, these things are going to keep happening until you stand with everybody else who feels that this is wrong. Now, we hear more details today about, you know, what happened. They still haven't given us every detail because I'm pretty sure they don't have all the details yet. We did find out that there was a knife. They did find it in the vehicle. All right. So, but the question is, you shot him in the back 8 times. Not once, not twice, 8 times. While you were within arm's length of him because you were able to grab him. Okay. First of all, you should have never gotten him that far, letting him get that far. Number one. Number two, you had to know that the knife wasn't on him because you had him on the floor already. All right. So there were so many things about this that are wrong. And there's so many problems with prosecuting this, if you're a prosecutor, because there are so many things that, one, you're going to pray that you get accurate information from the people that were there. The cops' stories are going to be what they are. Because nobody wants to go down this, even if you weren't the guy that fired the gun.
And you don't have body cams to prove anything.
Yeah, that's a whole other place. You're relying on different angles of cell phone videos that, honestly, the one where you see the scuffle doesn't show you everything. You can't tell what's going on in that video. You can tell there's some kind of commotion. You can't tell who's getting the best of who. How did he get off? Did he have a knife at that point? You can't tell any of that. So there's so much wrong with this case that you have to look at basically what you look at. Right at that point, when they let him go around to the car, why did you have your weapon drawn if you didn't know he had the knife? You just said he admitted he had a knife. Didn't mean he had the knife on him. So there's so many things when you look at this that why did you immediately go to the gun? Well, the taser didn't work, but there's three of you. You telling me 3-on-1 you can't win?
Listen, I think, and again, I think the officer wanted to shoot him. I really believe that. I think that's what he wanted to do. You don't shoot someone 8 times when they're not a threat to you, unless, like LeBron said, he wakes up that morning and says, I want to kill a black person. And that's what happens. And one of the things I always try to give talking points to friends and family members and coworkers of mine. And one of the things people always say, friends of mine have said this. They said, well, if Black Lives Matter, why aren't you protesting all the killings that go on in Chicago or all the killings that go on in LA with the gangs? And my response to them is this: 95% of all mass shootings in America in schools and malls are done by white males. So don't tell me, don't tell me that, well, how come you're not protesting the violence in Chicago? How come you're not protesting the violence in 95% of all mass shootings in America are done by white males? Like Doc Rivers said, it's the African Americans who love this country, and the country doesn't love them back. And the African Americans are the ones who are getting killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I could just get one more thing in real quick. I think you can perfectly encapsulate what the issue is in 2 instances in Wisconsin that happened barely a week apart. Jacob Blake is shot in the back 7 times with no known weapon on him, no known history of his criminal record or his criminal past, but no hesitation whatsoever. 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, I think his name is, walks past police with a long gun from out of state, kills 2 people, injures a third, walks back towards the police. Not a single shot is fired at him whatsoever. They haven't known he was the person that shot those people. Who else in the vicinity has a long gun on them? But he can perfectly walk back to the police, walk past the police, and not a single round fired at him whatsoever. If you don't see what a problem is between those 2 instances, then you just don't want to see the problem.
Here's the nauseating thing about that. When you talk about the shooting at the protest last night. Okay, so everybody knows those cops are responding to a call for shots fired at that point, right? If I'm a law enforcement officer, the first thing I'm going to do when I'm approaching the scene of a shooting, if I see somebody with a gun, the first thing is to get them on the floor and get the gun out of their hand. You don't know if that's the shooter or not. You don't know if somebody's protecting themselves. The first thing is to disarm people in the area, okay? To find out, right, to control that area, you got to get everybody under control, whether they're illegally carrying or not. There's times where you've seen undercover cops, if there's something going on where there's a shooting in the area, where they will even make the undercover cop until they can verify that he is a law enforcement officer. You're going to drop your weapon too. Okay. The fact that you saw those cops driving over there to respond to this shooting, the kid walks up with the gun and they just go, okay, all right. No, you should have been stopped. All right. Get on the speaker and say, hey, drop the weapon now. Okay, get on the floor and drop the weapon now. All right. You don't know if that's the shooter or not. And it just turns out that it was the shooter. Granted, you hear that there was another one of these militia groups there. This kid wasn't alone. All right. There were other people that were armed there. There were all these militia people. All right. And some of the cops were actually happy to see them. Okay. So that's the nauseating part of it all. They didn't even verify. They didn't even do proper procedure when they saw the kid. Even if they knew if he's the shooter or not, proper procedure is to say disarm the people in the area to make sure, one, there's no more shooting. Number two, to find out who the shooter is. Okay, so they didn't even bother to do that. They just went in there and figured that their presence was going to do it all. So once again, if there's a training issue, there's some very bad training going on. That guys who were designed to respond to these situations didn't respond properly. So they should have been disciplined for that. Okay.
Again, it's 4 years ago that Colin Kaepernick kneed. This is why he kneeled. This is why he kneed down. When you see a white 17-year-old radical right wing, let's call it what it is. I'm not going to call these guys militias. I'm going to call them radical right wing terrorists. Okay, going around and shooting innocent protesters. Okay, like those two whack jobs who walked out on their front lawn and then they were speaking at the RNC convention last night. And the only reason why they were qualified is because they had guns pointing at black people. Yes. That was their only qualifications. Yeah. Okay, absolutely. So when you see these things happening, this is why Kaepernick kneeled. This is exactly why.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was shot because they said they confused his cell phone for a gun. There's a guy who clearly has a gun, doesn't get shot, and the guy that has a cell phone, that might be a gun. Let me just enter this round real quick.
You can name several cases of that happening. But yes, I remember the case you're talking about. There's also Amadou Diallo, where they couldn't tell it was his wallet that he was reaching for when they stopped him on his stoop, and they shot at him 41 times, hitting him 19. And killing him. So it's the point of you see black, you're threatened. You don't see black, you don't seem as threatened. And thank you, whoever Fresh Five is.
That's Uncle, yeah.
Yes. All right. I'm horrible with names, so if it's not something that's been burned into my brain, yes.
The sad truth is there's so many I can't keep up with the names.
That's what's so sad. That's what's so sad. I mean, look, we just talked about George Floyd, okay? And you thought things were going to change. And people are trying. I understand peaceful protesting, but again, I want to see armed black men protesting, and I don't want to see them killed anymore. I don't want to see them killed anymore. I'm not advocating violence. But when innocent black men keep getting shot, keep getting killed, how many more people must die before you fight back?
See, that's been the one thing that I said I was worried about. Okay. Because this keeps going, because the leadership of this country doesn't seem to think it's a problem.
They're encouraging it. They're encouraging it.
Yeah. So you have what we call escalation. All right. George Floyd happened after the Arbery shooting itself. He had Floyd. Okay. We had the protests and everything that sparked off. We had everything that happened there. Okay. At that point, what do we have after that? All of a sudden, the police started to push back. We start to see more and more of the tear gas. You saw the police unions rallying, talking about we are not going to take this treatment. The anger started to build on both sides. The police started to push back. Okay. But then you had more and more cities push back. We saw Portland where they said, enough of that. We're taking over this city. So they took over a whole portion of the city, forced the police out. So then you had a little swing back because people said, you know what, we got to treat them properly. We're not going to come after them. We're not going to use tear gas anymore. We're not going to do this. Okay. What swung it back the other way? When the second part of Portland happened, when the federal agents started showing up, right? And all of a sudden they're beating people off the street. And now you got violence back the other way. So more and more of these militias showing up. Yes, Ma and Pa Jed on the lawn with their guns, pointing them at people. So now it became, well, as long as we got guns, we can control these looters ourselves. So now you saw more of these groups popping up on protests with their guns. All right. And now, what's the next step? At some point, there will be protesters with guns. At some point, there will be a shootout, because if you're not going to stop these guys from coming to the protests armed, and I saw this back with a few weeks ago in New York,
and in Atlanta,
with the
they had over 300. They had over 300 African American men and women walking the streets with guns.
Yeah, if you remember in Bay Ridge, all right, they had a Black Lives Matter protests, and then the Back to Blue came out, and it led to a fight. Why? Because Back to Blue came angry. All right.
It happened here in Colorado a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, they came angry, and they're angry now. The cops are angry. They feel like they're the bad guys. And honestly, I'm going to say this, and there are people, if you have family that's law enforcement, if you're on the Back to Blue side, let me show you something. That was my father's. All right. So I come from a family of law enforcement, and that's not the only badge in my family. All right. So the problem with Back to Blue is no matter what, that blue line doesn't get crossed. When you have bad cops, you don't report them, you don't do anything to them, because you're considered a rat, and then all of a sudden you're the bad guy. Okay? You can't have that. If you're going to enforce the law, if you want people to be transparent with you, you have to be fair and transparent with the people you're supposed to be protecting. Okay, and if you have guys that are doing the wrong thing, if they're a white supremacist who's using their badge the wrong way, if there's somebody who just is on a power trip, if they're having a bad day and they decide to beat the heck out of somebody for no reason, okay, these are the people you don't want on the badge. And about a badge, because you know what? Eventually, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The opposite reaction is, well, you know what? Joe Criminal that day that gets pulled over is going to shoot a good cop because he doesn't feel like going to jail. Now you got a good cop that goes in the ground when he shouldn't. All right. So there's always an equal and opposite reaction. That's not what you want. So until you get rid of that thin blue line that says we stand together no matter what, it's never going to change. It's never going to change.
I would take that a step further. I mean, the thin blue line is a problem. It's not the problem. A lot of people like to talk about, well, what about the violence in Chicago or Detroit or New York or LA? How come you don't care about blacks killing blacks? I 100% get frustrated about blacks killing blacks. I think there is more that we as African Americans can do to help stem that problem. But at the same time, if you take away fair housing measures, if you keep people in one area and prevent them from moving up and treat them like animals for so long, then they're going to start to act like animals. I can't speak for every person, but a lot of the crime that I saw growing up, a lot of the crime I still see today, is a measure of, well, if I don't do this, I'm not going to eat tomorrow. I can't be seen as a punk. I got a family to take care of. If you have that same mentality for 50 plus years, that's just going to go on from generation to generation to generation. Like I said, there's stuff that black people can do to help stem that. But for the large part, they don't know any better, and they're not given opportunities to know any better. So if you really want to stop black people from committing crimes and putting themselves in situations where police have to shoot them, you really want to stop black on black crime, address the issue, systematic institutional racism. Until you get rid of that, the problem is never going to go away, no matter how much you fix the police department, no matter how much you throw into a Boys and Girls Club. It's going to be there until you fix what the actual issues are.
And that's why, like someone like LeBron James and the Dodgers, what they're doing this voting cycle because of the pandemic and voter suppression. LeBron James is organizing with his group, and the LA Dodgers. They're going to have anyone can come and vote in Dodger Stadium. They're going to have social distancing. They're going to have buses going all in and out of the city. And that's listen. A lot of people don't like LeBron James. If you look at just what he's done off the court with his school, with now voting rights, he is an actor. I think Colin Kaepernick, when history is said and done, is going to go down as a civil rights icon. And what LeBron James is doing, I mean, just think about how many poor people are in South Central LA. You look at the poverty there. He's making it these people to vote. And that's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. And when it comes down to it, you have to vote because you have to change this. The first step of changing this is at the top. You got to get this knucklehead out of there, right? And I'm saying that because I knew he was a knucklehead when he was just a businessman in New York, wasting people's time. I ended up in that same business with him and watched every business that he owned, every property he owned go into foreclosure. It's not the guy I wanted running the country, and he's
not the guy. He's not the guy I want running anything. Listen, I grew up in New York. You're being nice. I'm going to call him what he is. He's a criminal. He's a racist. He's a sexual predator, and he is a virus to America.
Absolutely. But when it comes back to what we were talking about with the communities, low-income communities, right? When people say, well, what about Chicago? What about New York? Well, let's talk about Chicago. Because Chicago and New York have the same problem, all right? A little less of a problem in New York than Chicago. And it's geographics, okay? Well, they're killing each other in Chicago. Well, how is it so that you have so many guns on the street when there are no gun stores in Chicago? All right, you can't go down the street, buy a gun, and go kill somebody in Chicago. Okay, handguns especially. All right, gun ownership is so tight in Chicago. So how are these guns getting on the streets? Well, if you look at Illinois, it's surrounded by states like Wisconsin, where open carry supported. They're gun states. Well, it's real easy to smuggle guns into cities like Chicago when the borders are, and if you look at the numbers of Chicago, and everybody goes, well, it's a political party that's ruining that city. No, because if you look at it, the Chicago PD is taking more guns off the street this year than New York has. But yet they're still shooting people. They're still getting in there. Okay, it's just like when you talk about low-income neighborhoods and drugs. Well, it's a big problem in low-income neighborhoods. Well, it's in rich neighborhoods too. There are plenty of rich people buying their drugs and doing them in their house, and you don't know. They're not exactly going out there looking for them either. So I know people who are in law enforcement, live in a very affluent suburb in New York, who have kids in their basement doing drugs, and they don't even know about it. And they're narcs. So, right. So it's very interesting when you look at a certain neighborhood, usually the impoverished neighborhoods, and say, this is the problem there. This is why this keeps happening. That's not the only reason why. It is a systemic problem, and it's going on for decades. Even more than that, it's going on for centuries, really. Ever since slavery ended, and you had segregation in those poor neighborhoods, there's always been methods of keeping those people where you want them. And guns are one thing, drugs are another thing, and it leads to crime. And it's real easy to lock people up and keep them in that cycle. Go ahead.
One of the things that people don't realize, one of the first things that Donald Trump did when he got into office is he took away the Obama executive order. Obama said that a person with a history of violence or a criminal record cannot purchase a gun legally. Okay, so what did Donald Trump do? One of the first executive orders, he overturned that and says, if you have a mental illness, it's your right to own a gun. And one of the reasons why he did this is because the NRA gave Donald Trump $30 million for his political campaign the last couple of months before he went into the White House. So more guns on the street means more violence. And when you see that this white kid, this radical right-wing terrorist walking down the street with a gun, thinking that he has to kill people, that's a mental illness. This kid's not right in the head. He's not. You at 17 years old, you should not say, "I'm going to go where people are peacefully protesting with my gun and shoot someone." But again, I don't know where he got this gun. I don't know how he got this gun, but there's a lot of people in this nation right now who are part of what the media calls the militia, but they're radical right-wing terrorists, neo-Nazis who believe whites are superior, and what they want to do is kill minorities. And that's what's happening. It's easier to get guns on the street now, and that's a huge part of the problem.
It is. It is.
I would say another part of the problem, Chicago is the perfect example of the hypocrisy of how the situation is handled. I spent about 18 months in Chicago when I served the mission. If you never went past the Magnificent Mile in Chicago, you would think that there's no issue with Chicago whatsoever. Well, look at these high rises, these stores, this beautiful landscaping. Go and touch the bean. Well, I don't know what people are talking about. Chicago's bad. But if you go a few miles down the road to Chicago and Pulaski, get into the blue light district where the police don't even want to go down there. They just put these little blue lights on top of street lamps so they can monitor crime. So it's really not an issue of how the places are run. It's an issue of what sections of the places are run. There's no issues with the Magnificent Mile, but there's issues in the housing projects because they don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, well, that's anywhere. If you go into, if you're a tourist and you go into Times Square, you know, you think, oh, New York's not that bad. You know, there's cops everywhere. You know, yeah, there's people doing drugs and stuff like that. You know, but overall, you don't see what certain parts of the South Bronx still look like. You don't see what certain parts of Queens and Brooklyn still look like. You don't go up to certain parts of Harlem, even though Harlem doesn't really look like Harlem used to. You know, when I grew up, the South Bronx was how you saw it in those 1980s movies: burnt out buildings, burnt out cars, graffiti trains, and there were drugs and crackheads everywhere. That's how it was. You know, and I experienced what they called white flight. You know, when my parents bought that house in 1980, a lot of my neighborhood still had a lot of white people in it. And over the years, you saw it dwindle down and down and down because they said the black people are moving in and it's time to go. You know, so because why? Because the black people didn't want to live in that part of the South Bronx with all them burnt out buildings and stuff. You know, when you don't have, there's always going to be somebody around you that wants to take what you got. That's how the hood is. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the hood in New York, whether you're in the wards of Louisiana, the hood is the hood. When it's low income and people are down in the dumps because they don't have a lot of great outlook on life, the education in that area is poor, the teachers don't want to be there, the cops are waiting to see what you're up to because they just know this neighborhood is not where they want to work. All right, they'd rather be somewhere where they can sit around and do a couple of cycles and check out stuff on their phone or listen to the radio, the next game on the radio. Right, it's a totally different thing to police Midtown. Well, although it's pretty bad now, but the police Midtown as opposed to policing old Brownsville in Brooklyn. You know, so I'm gonna. Real quick.
I'm just going to end with this. The job of the police is to protect and serve.
Absolutely.
The job of the police is not to shoot first, ask questions later. Okay. And if you're a police officer and you're not protecting and serving, get the hell off the police force because you're a disgrace to what the badge stands for.
Absolutely. Thomas, you got any final thoughts?
Man, just hearing you guys, it's really, you know, knowing that there's a background behind it all, it kind of opens my eyes a little bit. and I'm gonna try to not get a little bit emotional here. But
Get emotional. We won't knock you for it.
Doc
All,
Rivers
no,
did.
all
no,
the points have been tallied. You won't lose anything.
but no. Honestly, uh, I'm under the mindset now where I feel like we're not prioritizing experience. We're not prioritizing righteousness. We're not prioritizing simplicity, right versus wrong, wrong being wrong. There's no way of trying to measure how wrong this person is in comparison to how wrong another person is. Um, we are living in a society where we are struggling with that. And for and I'm bringing it, and I want to bring it back to our youth because we are the ones that are, we are exposed to this, believe it or not. And we're watching everything go down every day. We're looking up on our phones, and what do we see going through our feed? That video, that conversation, whatever the case may be, it's always exposed to us. And even if you try to control it, you literally can't, because even if you control it from one building, as soon as you start walking somewhere else, you'll start hearing it in another spot. Um, and just putting in the perspective is going to be um, is going to be a little bit challenging for us to really kind of uh, you know not accept it, but to try to find a way to provoke that type of change that we are all looking for. Because we, for the most part, most of us do not have that history. We do not know that background. And quite honestly, it doesn't help that for those of us who have graduated, like myself, that have been in school for 12 years, been in public school for 12 years, they did not teach some of this stuff that we're talking about right here. And if you could imagine the effect that it's having on our kids and our young men and women who are trying to figure things out, and they don't know what to say, and they don't know how to react, and they don't want to come across as someone who doesn't know any better. But at the same time, they also are aware that they don't know everything. And so, I just kind of feel like, um, it's very disheartening for me, um, given the fact that I don't know. That's literally the phrase every day. I don't know. I have no idea. Um, I have no idea. And that shouldn't be the phrase of a young black man or woman in today's society. Um, and it hurts a lot, just kind of watching it all together. And just like Monty said, we need a vote. We need a vote. Um, it starts at the head. Um, and
Listen, when you're disheartened and when you're feeling bad, something I always go to, there's more people on the right side of history in this country than there are less. 70% of Americans support Black Lives Matter. Now you may see on TV the minority is pushing their agenda, but 70% of Americans support the Black Lives Matter movement. So when you get disheartened, just believe there's more of us than them. 7 out of 10 of us are on the right side of history.
I'm with you, and I see it, and that's another thing that I was going to bring up. Like there's no, I don't think anybody ever dismisses the people who are putting themselves on the line to bring upon change. Which is why when you see stuff like the NBA postponing their games today, you see, and I just want to also give a lot of credit to Kyrie Irving, who decided that the reason behind him not coming to the bubble, not being a part of the NBA games, was because he wanted the social reform, and he was going to do whatever it took uh, to provide that. And so I feel like for those, and myself included, uh, apologies are probably waiting at his doorstep, because there was a lot of people that criticized Kyrie for uh, for his take on why he didn't want it to be a part of the bubble, and now we're seeing why that's being manifested. And so, like I said, we living in a world now where it's just, you really don't know. You have to always look behind your head, behind your back, eyes everywhere. And even still, there still might be a possibility that something might go down. So, um, you know, just I just want to put into perspective about um, where it's really going to hit home for a lot of us, because I don't have any kids as of yet, but I'm pretty sure some of us are fathers here, and so before, I'm pretty sure, um, you know it was a conversation later on in life to have with their son or daughter about what's going on in our country. Now they're starting, not as literally as they come out the womb, but once they start getting that level of understanding that now, this is what you're coming up against, and it's very sad, and it's very disheartening, and it hurts. It hurts a lot. As you can tell by my voice, it affects me a lot as well. Given the fact that, believe it or not, given this platform that we all have, um, me being, like I said, me being young, I don't know who I'm touching doing this. I don't know who I'm impacting doing this. We all don't know unless somebody says anything. But this is, when stuff like this happens, it just encourages us to all uh, for us to all do our part as far as providing the. I'm sorry, leading and by example for those who are watching us, and who who are looking up to us, because it matters, believe it or not, and it serves a lot of purpose. So I just want y'all to keep that on your minds when we have stuff like this going on, because that's kind of what gets pushed away. Oh, that person is too young, or that's not the age group that we want to focus on. But that's where it hits us the most, because we're getting everything all at once, and we don't know how to feel about it. So uh, that's what I would like to say about that.
Keith, you got anything else you want to add before we start to wrap this up?
Just to say, I just feel like at this point, enough is enough. I am probably one of the most pessimistic people that you'll ever meet. But what went down today in the NBA was the first time in 33 years that I felt like, okay, this is a moment. This is it right here, where there's going to be some real change that happens. And there's still a little piece in the back of my mind that says it's probably not going to happen. That's my nature. That's who I am. But at least at this point, I feel like they've heard us. We have to keep talking, let them keep hearing us. And if it doesn't work out, we've done pretty much all that we can outside of starting another civil war. And that's all I could possibly want at this point. Is it going to work? I don't know. But do we have a good opportunity at this point to make this work, to get equality, not just for Black people, but for women, for Hispanics, for Asian people? Let's put everyone on equal footing. And if it's going to happen, I feel like it's going to happen now.
Marty, you got any final thoughts? And remember, I got the buzzer ready. All right?
No, I think, for this topic, I think it's fitting for Thomas, Keith, and yourself to end as African Americans. So I have nothing else to add.
Oh, I have to buzz you. Okay. That's a good one. That's a good one. I'm just going to finish this off, and I'll sign off the show at the same time. I'm not going to drop you guys to the back for this. I am now 44 years old. My parents were people that lived through that civil rights era, dealt with segregation. My father was a Marine, had to wait in the colored section in Marine uniform, was told to go out back to get his food in Marine uniform. All right. So I didn't experience the civil rights era. I came after. The fact that we're still having a lot of these conversations, the fact that we're still having a lot of these issues is disheartening to me. I now have two daughters. One is a college age, one is approaching high school age. I hoped at this point of life that we would be past this, that we would start to be moving on. And today was another moment. And we've had a lot of moments over the years. Whether it was our first black president was a moment, because for many years we didn't believe that would ever happen. I remember going to rallies for Jesse Jackson running for president, and it seemed like a joke that we would ever have a black president. If you remember, we came out with a movie, Head of State, just a couple of years before Obama got elected. It was a joke thinking of a black man as a president, and we got to that point. So we've had a lot of moments, but I want to see more progress. I want to be able to say we made this much more progress. We made that much more progress. And it's something we don't have enough of, because every time we turn around and you make that one step forward, we take that one step back, whether it was the kid in Charlottesville, whether it's Dylan Roof shooting up the church, whether it's this kid yesterday. You look at the age of the people in these incidents. They're young or the same age as my oldest daughter. All right. So that means it's being passed down, which stops the progress that we are trying to make. When we talked about it, Keith, you're a mixed marriage. I have plenty of mixed marriages in my family. My nephew just went to college, and this is my oldest brother's son. And if you see him on the street, you would never know that his father's black. He's blonde hair, blue eye. So I can imagine there's going to be some point, if it hasn't happened yet, it's going to happen eventually, somebody who doesn't know his father's black is going to sit there and say something about a black person that he's going to take offense to. And they're going to go, bro, what's your problem? Well, I'm black. And their jaw is going to drop. We have gotten to this point in this country where we have started to say race doesn't matter who you marry. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know what you're dealing with. We have to start to grow as a society the same way. We can't keep going back to forth to saying, it's a black person problem, it's a white person problem. What about white on white crime, black on black crime? Crime is crime. Okay. We have to get past the point of putting it back into it's their problem. Or racism doesn't happen, or we're better than this set of people. At this point in time, we should be past all that, and we need to have more of that progress and less moments, because we've had plenty of moments over the years. It's time for real change and progress. So that's where I'm going to leave this show off with tonight. I know we went a lot longer because we wanted to talk about this moment in time, another moment, and I'm hoping that we can have more progress. So for Monte Perez of the Full Monty Show, for Thomas Brown, our Eagles writer, and of course Keith Richards, the most famous name in nuts and bolts sports. All right, signing off for the Champions Edition. Once again, we have another Champions Edition next week with 3 more champions coming on. All right, so stay tuned. 9:00 Eastern for No Huddle Necessary. This is your host Jeff Barnes signing you off. Everybody have a good night.